Hello, everybody. My name is Sylvain Rochon, and I am just writing an article, and I want to do an accompanying post to this article. This article is entitled "The Sandbox Governing Principle." It's an idea I had a while ago. Kind of an illustration of how government and private sector should operate and who's responsible of what. And I've spoken of this quite a bit over the years, especially since I've run companies, I've run corporations, I've been involved. So I've seen from the inside how a corporation works, how a company works, and its dynamics, and why it takes certain decisions, for example. Of course, I haven't been involved in politics myself, but I've been talking a lot about politics. I've been reading a lot, and I've had a number of individuals that are aware and inside politics speaking with me at different times, including some interviews and whatnot. So anyway, the idea is that, or the reason why I think I care about this is because we have things upside down right now. We have and this is not everywhere in the world because I can't generalize, but a lot of times, at least in the West, those governments that I'm aware of, governments they seem to have too much of an ear for the private sector, for the companies. They kind of lose track of what's important, I think. The mandate of a government is to take care of the people, and if you take the most common denominators of every citizenry in the world, the only thing we all have in common is basic needs. It's our biology, right? So security, shelter, food, and a sense of communal purpose. This is something every individual, every single community has. And this should be the primary focus of every government, to ensure that their population is going to have that covered. This is the basics. Above that, it can be all sorts of layers of complexities because of religion, culture, traditions, languages, you name it. But that's a common denominator. And if a government is not putting the basic needs of their population first, now, notwithstanding all the other complexities that they may have to take care of because the population is caring about different things based on where you are in the world, they're not doing a good job. And what happens often is that they get distracted by companies. Companies have a certain amount of power because they have money. Sometimes there's corruption going on. Sometimes it's just they have a big voice because of lobby. And politicians of all ilk listen to the companies, and they take decisions that satisfy a company's need for growth, competition, and whatnot, but does not necessarily help the consumer. They get fooled sometimes in the discussions, and we've seen this in the States in the new tax plan, where a lot of people are kind of, I don't think it's the majority of people in the States, but a significant amount of the population have become convinced that if you allow big companies get more profits, get more revenues, then it's going to somehow trickle down to the employees. And that it just doesn't work that way. And I'll tell you why. In particular, big companies like corporations that are privately traded, even private corporations that are not publicly traded, sorry. The way it's structured is that you have investors that have invested early on or a little bit later on. They want to make more money, and the way they can make more money is by the company generating more revenues and more profits. So their goal, the owners, their goal is to make more money, not to satisfy everybody else's basic needs. It's to make money. That's what they do. And they put in place a board of directors, in the case of corporations, that will manage the company on their behalf, because they're busy doing some other stuff and being on a beach somewhere, or whatever they're doing as investors. Okay, and that includes people that invest in the stocks in the stock market. They are shareholders, owners of companies in part. They want to make money. That's why you invest in stock markets. Anyhow, the board members, they select executives. These are the operational people, and they hire employees. And all these individuals that are, let's say, in the infrastructure below the owners, their whole mandate is to ensure the company does more revenues or profits for the owners. That's their sense of purpose. Otherwise, they get fired. It just won't work. So what happens is, if a company has more profits or more revenues because of lower taxes, for example, or some other regulation that favors the company is going to take whatever decision that will satisfy the owners, because the individuals that are inside the company, their livelihood is based on their ability to generate more revenues and profits for the owners. That's why they are there. That's their reason of being. That's the company's reason of being. That's why the investors set it up in the first place. Now, that can be good for the employees, like hire new employees with more profits. That happens. Getting more equipment, that is also possible. But it also can have other effects, like, well, let's buy automated equipment and replace a bunch of workers, because long term it's a lump investment right now, but long term you're going to save money because people are actually expensive. So you can have all sorts of results, because the company's goal is not to ensure that they have more employees and the employees are happy. No, the objective is primarily to generate more revenues. So that's why this whole trickle-down economics to the employees that people are fed is, at the face of it, wrong. It does not work. Now, there's a bunch of different ways to incentivize companies, and I'll get right to that because that's part of the sandbox analogy, that will help the individuals, but not blanket tax breaks for companies. It doesn't work. It doesn't guide them in the right direction. Now, here's the sandbox analogy, the governing principles. Companies have this singular vision. Sure, you have some exceptions like not-for-profits, charities. These are minor companies that are generally not very big, not so influential compared to the big ones that have lots of cash flow. They are there and they have their own purposes. They're set up, usually is to help other people. That's great. We're not talking about those. These are a minority. This is a small amount of the market. And there are some corporations and some owners that are set up for profitability, and the owners absolutely want to do good. That is also a minority, and I'm not talking about those because this is very small proportion, and they don't compete very well in the market because they have these hang-ups, you know, that others don't have, and so they get out-competed most of the time because we want cheaper products, for example. So what happens with the sandbox analogy, and I don't know if you know what a sandbox is, but here's an image of one. It has sand in the middle, and it has a box. So sandbox, pretty simple. Kids play in it, and we like the free market idea out here in the West, and it works reasonably well because it allows innovation, and people try to compete for our wallets, for us paying for the goods and services. So we want to have a high quality, cheaper product, and we want the upgrades, and the competitive nature of the free market actually serves us well. And they progress and innovate more by getting our money, and they get profits. They go and innovate more. They try to compete each other. It's dog eat dog, but I mean, it's for now that's what we have. And companies that fail. Those that do well and that satisfy our needs, then they do better. Some die off because they can't follow the market, or because they can't really provide something that we want, right? That we really want, and others have better products and so on. So that kind of works. But if you just let them loose in the sandbox and you don't put any walls to it, they just do whatever they want to compete against the others and to win. Because the objective of the owners is to make money. That's what they want. So it's important to have a box around it to contain this activity, this free market. And this is the regulations, the laws, regulations that are set up by a neutral party that is supposed to take care of the population. That's the government. If the government is trying to take care of our basic needs, then as a number one preoccupation, then they set up regulations and limitations for those companies to play with, and they make it clear, they advertise, do this way, otherwise there are penalties, criminal law, civil law, all this stuff, right? And companies will just, if these laws are enforced and these regulations are clear, the companies will all compete in the same market under the same regulations and laws. So that's a way for government to play in our favor, to create those guidelines that allows us to get the products we want. So that's the playground in the free market area, but also it forces the companies to do things that we think is moral, that we think is good, that we as a citizenry feel is important. The government is the one that is establishing all that stuff. So, and if companies have too much impact, or too much of a voice, and governments, just follow a company's suggestion to make them successful, ultimately it could help us, but maybe not, because they try to make money. That's why they're complaining. They have the big lobbies. The governments absolutely have to create that box. If the box is too high, like the boundaries, then it's hard to play. And it's you have a situation where you have companies that, for example, can't compete in the global market. That's a problem. So you have to adjust it. If it's too low, then the sand spills out. And then you have sands and companies playing in all sorts of places you don't want them to play. It needs to be contained, because it's companies and government both should be servicing us. Right now, in a lot of countries in the West, I see, and I think it's also true in Asia, in Africa, and most locations, companies have way too much power. Sometimes the government itself has power, and the citizenship is essentially just a slave to the system. And we kind of wonder, with all the technology that we have right now and the knowledge about how we work, how the universe functions, why are we at the bottom of the food chain, like as citizens? Why are companies and governments on the top, and we are working to keep them alive and keep them efficient? And we can see that like every time. It bothers me every time I look at like a market report. They talk about GDP, they talk about the stock market's really strong, and they talk about these elements, and that's cool for companies. I mean, if the people are fed, they have their basic needs met, their common denominating elements met, and they're happy. Cool. Like a good, healthy economy is great as well, because it shows all sorts of metrics that shows the health in the global market, and more products and more stuff going on, and there's lots of innovation inside the companies. It's awesome. But if you have all this growth in the economy, and you still have, like in the States right now, you have 50% of the population that is under the poverty line, seems to me like there's a problem. You have the wealthiest market capital, wealthiest companies in the West, in the world, sorry, are in very few countries, but a lot of them are in the West. Actually, they're in the U.S. So I can't speak today. Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, like the largest market capitalized companies in the Western Hemisphere, they're here, and that's great. We love it, but you have all these poor people. So where's the government? Are we going to keep feeding these large companies and hoping that the companies are going to take the higher road and hire just a bunch of people to spend money? No, it won't work that way. So the onus is really on us, on citizens, to take good decisions in what we buy, because ultimately, even though we're at the bottom of the food chain, so to speak, or we're basically slaves to a bunch of systems now, we ultimately have the power, because we are the people inside the companies still. doing the work. We can protest, we can change companies, we can make good choices as far as employment. It's hard, but we could do that. We can certainly choose with our wallets what types of products and services, but we're the ones feeding those companies. And certainly, and last but not least, and more important, is that we can't blame, as citizens, the companies for behaving the way they're behaving. We know they're there for profitability. What we need to do is we need to put our government accountable and prevent them for preferring company profits to providing basic needs to human beings. They're there primarily to help us, people, live. That's the most basic function they should have. And companies within the sandbox, within regulation, the companies will work with whatever regulation they have available to them. Like as long as it's fair for all the companies in one industry, they're all going to try to compete within the rules. The government just has to have the balls to create the right rules that will benefit their citizens first, and that will ensure that the citizens aren't harmed by company actions. That company actions will create benefits that will allow people to, for example, have a job, right? And that will allow people to have at least a subsistence type of living. And there's a bunch of ways to go about it, but I'm still seeing this these antiquated discussions with governing bodies where they say they're doing something for the population, but factually it doesn't really help them directly. And they're just kind of confusing us into thinking, well, there's going to be some kind of trickle down. It's like as a rebound, the population is going to be elevated instead of directly investing. And case in point is the tax breaks in the States. In Canada, you had the recent cancellation of the basic income in Ontario, basic income trial, which is a great way to figure out how that could work. And it directly resolves the very costly problem of poverty in Canada. It could duplicate it in most other places in the world, really. The cost of the basic income across the nation is $76 billion. That's that one plan that they had in Ontario, if it's applied federally. And the cost of poverty, about 9.3% of Canadians are below the poverty line. The cost of those people being below the poverty line overall is costing somewhere between $72 and $86 billion. And yet the government, the Canadian government, the government in this case, are arguing whether or not that's a good idea because it's going to cost too much. Yeah, initially it's going to cost a lot of money, and then the returns on removing poverty is going to take a number of years to get back. But we go into debt all the time for all sorts of reasons, including for military spending on occasion, or sometimes other reasons for economic growth, which is spending in companies mostly, not necessarily directly in situation. This is an opportunity to invest directly in providing basic needs to the population. Whether you're a libertarian, liberal, conservative, doesn't matter. We all need that subsistence. We all need to have basic needs met. They could directly resolve that. That would be a responsible government, in my view. And then, sure, think about all these tax credits, these incentives to companies to guide them, that sandbox box, right? And let the companies play inside there. They're going to be happy. They're going to compete, and we're going to have all the advantages of the free market coming out of it. We just need, as citizens, to vote for the right people to be put in place so that we have what we need. Right now in Ontario, what happened is that a conservative government came into place. All the other parties basically were either in favor or advocating the basic income initiative. The Conservatives won, and they scrapped it because they didn't like it. They thought it was too expensive. They are conservative. Conservatives in general, the name says it, they don't like change. They like things the way they are. Well, the things the way they are is almost 10% of the population are poor. And if you conserve that, well, you're going to conserve that number. Anyway, that's it for now. Enough ranting. I'll be publishing the article on my on Medium, I think, this one. And as you can check it out in writing, the link is in the down below. And if you want to follow me, or you want to participate in one of my projects, writing or otherwise, or speaking engagements, please contact me, and I will, of course, respond, and we'll see what we can do. All right, ciao for now. Bye-bye.